Time for some stories you deposited in the memory bank.
The memory bank, the memory bank. We're the nice bank. Would you like to bank with us?
All of them are truthful, every now and then they're a little bit frank.
The memory bank, the memory bank. Ooh, I'm sorry about your very overdrawn.
Email us your stories, or text or tweet, or send them round with Hank.
Send them with Hank, send them with Hank to the memory bank.
So this week on the Memory Bank, we are talking about airline travel, planes, stories that have happened to you in airports, around planes, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Past interest in passengers you've been sat next to. Or...
Do you like to fly, Edith?
I do. I like to fly on my own.
Yeah.
I find it a bit of an adventure.
Sure.
It's always slightly stressful when, when you're with the family and whatnot and stuff. But
with whatnot especially, he's awful.
Whatnot, yeah. We never know what he's going to get up to, whatnot.
Yeah, exactly.
But I do quite like flying. I always like the kind of, little drink before you get on, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. It makes you either fall asleep or cry.
Yeah.
And, what about you?
I used to loathe. I used to be very frightened of flying.
Really?
Yep. For a long time, I just suddenly got terrified of it. I think when I was in my teens, early 20s. Just felt very depressed whenever I had to fly, and would get into a funk like a few days before.
Don't use that word.
Sorry. I actually don't like that word myself. But I think I used it properly there. I got into a Craig Charles's Funky Bunker for a few...
Stop using it!
...days before flying, because I'd be thinking, oh, no, I don't like to fly. I don't like, I'm a sort of control freak, I suppose, and I don't like being in situations where I don't know what's happening and I can't see the guy driving the plane and stuff like that. I like it when they do the announcements and tell you exactly what's happening and stuff. And all the noises, I don't like the noises, and I always think, that's not a normal noise. Why is it doing that? I don't remember it doing that every time. And, the bit where it takes off, after you've taken off, and there's the initial roar of the engines, and then you sort of plateau a little bit, start to even out, and then it seems as if just all the engines are switched off. You think, no, that's no good.
I want to hear noise. I remember flying with Colin Murray quite a lot over a period of time. And Colin, every time we flew, we'd do this thing when the stewardess would do the announcement and do the life vests and stuff. And you have a light to attract attention and a little tube to blow up your thing, and then a whistle. And every time he would shout out, "In case you land in a rave!"
Hey!
Every time.
Come on, Colin.
I'm surprised he didn't get at least thrown off the plane once.
I wonder if he still does that.
Probably.
Did he ever get a laugh from the stewardesses?
No, just scowls.
No, of course.
Scowls.
Scowls is what he deserved. The other bad thing about flying, there's many bad things about flying. It's not an ideal way to travel. It feels deeply unnatural in many ways. You just think, this is...
How do they do it?
How do they do it? This is breaking all kinds of physical laws. No, it's magical. I don't know how they get this big metal tube up in the air. But the other thing is that it shoves right in your face the kind of inequity of modern society, i.e. you are forced to see at very close proximity how good the privileged have it up there in first class. And it is just, normally you're able to kind of... You're not really aware of how the other half live, right? They're in their special houses and their special chauffeur-driven cars or whatever.
They always turn left.
And you don't really get a glimpse of what it's actually like for them firsthand. But then suddenly when you're on a plane, you can see it. You walk in and it's like they are deliberately taunting you with how amazing it is for them up there in first class. They filter you past it and you see, whoa, look, they've got beds in there. They've got cottages. They've got individual cottages with waiters and girlfriends and boyfriends provided for them if they want. They've got everything up there. But you've got a story there, right?
I do. I was lucky enough to chat to hugely talented director David O. Russell.
Yeah.
The Fighter fame, and most recently Silver Linings Playbook, which is a brilliant film.
And Three Kings?
Three Kings
is one of my favourite films, yeah.
Great film. So, he's here, there and everywhere flying around, so I asked him about flying. So here's David O. Russell's tale of flying.
I went to my mom's funeral, God rest her soul, 12 years ago, and with a dear friend who came with me, Ben Hernandez Bray, came with me as like a brother to my mom's funeral, and then we were flying back, and we were sitting on an airplane, and this woman, for some reason, sometimes someone just chooses you to talk to you.
Yeah.
We were near the bathroom, and this older woman, she might have been in her 60s, she had had a few drinks, and she just decided she wanted to talk to these two nice young men, and she just started like leaning over us, talking, and she had all this cheese and food that was in her teeth, from eating. She'd been eating cheese and drinking wine, and it was like very perilous looking up at her because like these hunks would fly out, as she was talking. And we were like, just trying to talk to her and trying to say, well, we got to maybe wrap up this conversation. She, the kind of person who just won't stop. She just kept talking. She was happy. She'd had some drinks and she wanted to talk. And she was near the bathroom and she had us prisoner, And so she kept talking, and eventually, while she was talking, right when I was going to say to her, we really have to go from our chairs, and I could see it now in slow motion like a scene from Anchorman, as my mouth goes, go, that's a wide open mouth, a chunk comes flying out of her mouth, and in slow motion I see it coming towards me. I'm going, no, and it went in my mouth, all right? And I was like, I immediately was like, and I exploded out of my seat, and my friend Ben is laughing hysterically, and I just shoved her out of the way. At that point, I was done being polite. I was like, and I went into the bathroom. I jumped the line. I was like, flushing my mouth out with this 60-year-old woman's hunk of cheese from her booze mouth. Whoa, here it comes. No, right to my tongue.
60-year-old woman hunk of cheese from her booze mouth. That's a strong image.
Oh, it was brilliant.
David O. Russell, that was the film director. I mean, the other thing is first class situation now. They police it so strictly.
Yeah.
Because they know that there's always someone wanting to start their own little revolution,
It's that thing, if there's a queue in kind of economy of 40 people waiting for the toilet, and there's no queue in business or first for the toilet, and you go, I'm just going to go, and you try and get past the curtain.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
No.
And it's a force field.
It's a recent thing as well, because in the olden days, I remember travelling with my dad in the 70s and stuff. So you're on the plane, everyone's smoking away with their polishing their Kalashnikovs, and if you want to use the lav, you just if the economy one's full, just wander up to first class and use theirs. Have a whiskey and soda and another ciggy, and then come back. But you can't do that now. I mean, they stand there right by the curtain, and there's no way you're getting past. I mean, sometimes I just wait for the lights to go down and just make little ninja, sorties up there to first class and try and get in there. Slam the door. Yes! And it's exactly the same, except it's got a rose in a cup. And the topic for Memory Bank this week is air travel in its various forms. Do you have a story for us there, Edith?
I do. This is from Alessandra. She says, greetings, Buxton and Buxbow. When returning from a holiday in Greece, my parents and I had a pretty memorable experience at airport security. The departure lounge at this airport was tiny and stuffy, and due to delays, we'd been waiting for hours. We started queuing for about another hour as we tried to make our way to the hand luggage check-in, tired and befuddled. At this point, we put our bags on the machine and proceeded to the beepy thing. Mm-hmm. My mum walks through. Fine. I walk through. Fine. My dad approaches and is stopped by the outstretched hand of a security guard. The guard points his baton at my dad's crotch and says something in a heavy Greek accent, something like, Bombandamashi! Dad looks at him, slightly confused. The guard repeats, Bombandamashi! Doesn't stop doing so, getting progressively louder and even less intelligible. Bombandamashi! He's still wagging his baton at my dad's trouser department, while other guards have stepped in either side of my dad and grabbed his arms. Suddenly, my mum understands. Bum bag in the machine. My dad wearing his god-awful bum bag the entire holiday to outsmart pickpockets. And in all the airport tedium, had forgotten about it. He made it through security and we are stuck with him today.
It's very, I mean, that's a wonderful story. Thanks. Who was that from?
Alessandra.
And it also contained the phrase waggling his baton at his groin, which is always a good phrase.
Dad's trouser department.
It's nerve-wracking walking through the security these days. I mean, especially nowadays that everyone's slightly lost perspective in airports. That's just my personal opinion, not that of the British castle. But you know what I mean? You just think, here we go.
Shoes on or off? What's going on?
And you always forget as well, or at least I always do, because I'm not a frequent flyer. So you get to the airport and then you check in or whatever, and then you think, oh, I forgot about security. So you're there for the next hour. And I don't want to generalise, but a lot of the time, the guys they get up there with the X-ray machine, they're not fun guys. No. They're grumpy. Fair enough, I suppose. That's not a rewarding job, you would imagine. But boy, they're low on interpersonal charm sometimes.
The when you get searched as well, that's not a pleasant experience as well.
Maybe not for you.
No.
Here's a story though that I found online. This is a story that was written up by a journalist called Nick Carbone from February of this year, talking about emergency exit doors. And he says, sitting next to a screaming child on an airplane can make someone want to jump out of the window at the best of times. One man aboard a Vietnam Airlines plane recently attempted to take that adage literally. Luckily for all on board, the plane had already landed, but that didn't stop 29-year-old Lee Van Tuan from opening the plane's window exit and releasing the emergency slide. But it wasn't Van Tuan who wanted to escape, according to Associated Press. The mother and her screaming child he was sat next to were looking to disembark the plane as quickly as possible after landing at Ho Chi Minh City Airport. Turning to Tuan in the seat next door for help, he opened the door for the mother, according to the airport staff members. Neither Tuan or the mother ended up using the slide, and the incident led only to greater annoyance for all on board. The plane was disabled after the slide was opened, leading the airline to seek out another jet for the return journey. Vietnam's Tuoi Tray News reports that Tuan faces a fine of at least 15 million Vietnamese dong. That seems like a massive amount of dong, doesn't it? But it's actually more like £500. Still, a lot of money for simply opening the door. But the slide release, though it went unused, will prove even more costly. Much like an airbag, the slide must be refitted inside the plane at a cost of £6,000 to the airline each time. As uncommon as the situation seems, Vietnam Airlines is no stranger to erroneously opened exit doors. It's the third time in 6 months that a Vietnamese flyer has opened one. In November of last year, a 22-year-old college student who claimed he had never been on a plane before accidentally opened the door, thinking it would release the window shade. And in July, a man opened the exit door, and when asked why he did so, he said it was out of sheer curiosity. They were both fined 15 million Vietnamese dong.
Robin's tweeted to say the doors are armed, by the way, and impossible to open mid-flight to stop the crazies going crazy.
Oh, no! Here's a story from Anonymous. Someone anonymous has texted in. On a flight to Bali, my wife challenged the convention of wearing comfy clothes and chose to wear a pair of skinny jeans. After about 40 minutes, I was awoken by my wife screaming as her legs had expanded due to the altitude. And now the skinny jeans were considerably tighter and skinnier feeling. Such was the pain that she was enduring, she had to take them off. I helped her to do so in the toilet. And then she sat in her knickers, wrapped in the free rug you get for the rest of the 14-hour flight. She's an idiot hole. That is pretty basic, though. Come on, have you not heard of deep vein thrombosis? Don't go on with your skinny jeans, you raving lunatic.
This is from Dave. He says, hi Buxbo, wanted to share a troubling tale with you that occurred when I travelled to Florida about 8 years ago. I went to the toilet as you do before the flight at the airport, and I noticed a man dressed in a pilot's uniform, very possibly a pilot. It was unnerving that he was in fact crying his eyes out,
you don't want a crying
which
pilot.
made me very nervous about the flight indeed. Thank you for bringing such a lot of happiness to people's lives. That's it. But I love that story.
Crying pilot. That's no good at all. I mean, you shouldn't be allowed to fly a plane if you're crying. Don't cry. Do your crying in the cockpit.
We were not allowed anymore.
Get the air. Yeah, in the olden days as well. Cockpit was just, anyone can go up. You want to go? Yeah, come on, have a ciggy. Come and join us in the cockpit for a ciggy.
You got that?
There you go, son. How old are you? No. Have you ever been in a cockpit? Have a ciggy. Look at that. Yeah, play on the control. Have another ciggy. That one's run down. There you go, son. Look at that. Press the button. No, it doesn't matter. It's all right. We'll regain the altitude later. Have another ciggy. singing. Now come back. What's that, a gun? Oh, it's a nice gun, isn't it? Don't flash it around. People will get nervous. All right, you better go back to your seat, so we're going to land soon. Bye, have a ciggy. That's what it was like in 1970 when I used to go on planes. It was much better. Happy days. Here's a story now from Lee. He's typing with a broken arm.
Oh, wow, Lee.
From Slough. So this, I imagine, took a very long time. Dear A&E, I was once travelling back from a trip to Seattle, crammed in economy class, which wasn't pleasant with it being a 10-hour flight and me being 6'4" tall. Before takeoff, an older gentleman at the front of our section appeared to have had a funny turn and slumped limply in his chair. The paramedics arrived and eventually they decided that even though he had come round and was feeling better, he wasn't well enough to fly on such a long journey. After letting him and his family off the plane, I noticed the ample legroom his vacant seat at the front afforded and decided that I had to have it. Having been sat on that plane for over an hour while the drama unfolded, and I was already quite uncomfortable. I could see one of the stewardesses approaching down the aisle and was just preparing to grab her attention and ask to move to the vacant seat when a guy 3 rows in front of me put up his hand and asked the same thing. I was furious when she said yes, not only because I wanted the legroom myself, but because the guy was significantly shorter than me, and he didn't need it nearly as much. He moved to the vacant seat while I glared deep into the back of his head. However, a few moments later, he stood up, turned round, and probably through shock, announced to no one in particular, I think the old man wet himself. Felt like sweet, sweet justice as he waddled uncomfortably back to his original seat. And all I could hear in my head was Dr. Buckles shouting, in your face, seat thief!
Annoying man next to me jabbers on and on, ignoring all the usual clues that I am not interested in talking to you. Book, headphones, closed eyes. Meal was served and I noticed the man of foreign origin is slightly perplexed and not obvious of the Baby Bell cheese. Other brands are available. I debate whether to tell him how to eat it, but decide to let him figure out himself. Enjoy every second of him chewing his way through the entire piece of cheese, red wax and all.